I grew up in a small American town where nothing ever seemed to happen. It was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other by name, where kids played until the streetlights came on, and where people liked to say they could sleep with their doors unlocked. My summers were spent mostly at my grandmother's old house, an aging two-story home that sat just outside of town. To most people, it was just another weather-beaten farmhouse with peeling white paint and a porch that sagged a little on one side. To me, it was a second home, a place filled with childhood memories of climbing trees, chasing fireflies, and sitting on the front steps drinking sweet tea while the cicadas sang in the heavy evening air. But there was something about that house, even as a kid, that never sat quite right with me. I couldn't explain it then, and even now, years later, I struggle to put it into words. It wasn't that the house looked haunted. There were no broken windows or ominous towers or ivy-choked walls. It was something quieter, subtler. Certain corners felt colder than they should. Some rooms seemed to swallow light no matter how many lamps you turned on. The floorboards groaned in ways that didn't always match your footsteps. None of it seemed worth worrying about during the day, but once the sun went down, the shadows in that house felt a little too thick, a little too watchful. That summer, when I was about 10 years old, I stayed there for 2 weeks with my cousins. My grandmother, whose name was Margaret though everyone called her Maggie, was as practical and no-nonsense as they came. She had lived in that house her whole life and brushed off any talk of it being strange. "Old houses make noises," she'd say. "That's all it is. You kids just have too much imagination." My cousins, Ethan, who was 12, and Rachel, who was 9, were my partners in crime that summer. We spent our days exploring the woods behind the house, inventing games, and running wild until Grandma called us in for supper. At night, though, the three of us would huddle together in the living room to play cards or board games. None of us liked going upstairs alone after dark. One evening, a thunderstorm rolled through, heavy rain pounding on the roof, lightning flashing across the sky. We were in the middle of a game of Go Fish on the living room floor when the power flickered and then went out completely. The sudden silence of the television and the hum of the refrigerator dying left the house eerily still, except for the sound of the storm outside. Grandma, unbothered, lit a kerosene lamp and placed it on the table. Its golden light flickered and cast long, shifting shadows against the walls. The whole house seemed to shrink into that circle of light, everything beyond it swallowed by darkness. We tried to keep playing, but the storm had wound us up, and the shadows dancing on the walls made it hard to focus. That's when Ethan leaned in close, lowering his voice like he was about to share the juiciest secret in the world. "Do you guys want to see something?" he asked, his eyes glinting in the lamplight. Rachel and I looked at each other, then back at him. "See what?" I asked. He grinned, and for a moment I thought it was just one of his usual pranks. But there was something strange about the way he smiled. It wasn't his normal mischievous smirk. His grin stretched just a little too wide, and his eyes. I don't know how else to put it, but they didn't look like his eyes anymore. "Come here," he whispered. "I'll let you look. Come closer." I laughed nervously, thinking he was just trying to spook us because of the storm. "Cut it out, Ethan," I said. But his grin didn't fade. Rachel shifted uneasily beside me. "Stop being weird," she said, her voice small. "Closer," Ethan repeated, his voice dropping lower, slower, heavier. It didn't sound like him at all anymore. It was deeper, like it belonged to someone older, someone who had no business being inside the voice of a 12-year-old boy. I remember leaning forward despite myself, like something about his words pulled me in. My heart was racing, and every instinct screamed at me to back away, but my body didn't seem to listen. Rachel let out a shaky sob and clutched my arm. That was when Grandma walked back into the room. She must have heard us whispering because she didn't hesitate. She strode over, grabbed Ethan by the back of his neck, and gave him a sharp smack, not hard enough to hurt but firm, almost like she was snapping him out of something. The grin vanished instantly. His eyes blinked rapidly, and he looked around in confusion. "What happened?" he asked, his voice normal again. Rachel burst into tears, and I could barely find my own voice to answer. Grandma didn't explain. She just pulled us both close to her and said quietly, "Not everything that calls you wants to be seen." The storm raged on outside, but the house felt even quieter after that, as if it were holding its breath. None of us said another word about what had happened that night. And though we stayed the rest of the week, we never played cards by lamplight again. Please like and subscribe my channel for more romantic videos.